Good morning and welcome to Preparing for Prosperity. I'm AJ Harrison. It is Friday, September 8th, 2023. So we've had a bit of a busy time here around the homestead, especially with Sarah and the boys getting back. Trying to get second hay cutting done and baled has proven to be a pull your hair out stress situation that I'm finally just kind of over. And if we get anything, we get anything. If not, I've wasted like 60 hours and a bunch of diesel, and it just is what it is because that's farming. You could make some good money doing some farming stuff, selling hay, raising livestock, stuff like that. But you don't always make money. And every once in a while, you get to the point where it costs you a bunch of money and a bunch of time, and you don't actually recoup anything. And I'm feeling like that's where we're at right now. But that's okay because, again, that's farming. So we got our first part of our second cutting done while Sarah was in Massachusetts, and it turned out really well. We got about 10 acres done. We got about 10 ton of hay up and sold, and that covered the cost of our fertilizer for the fall. So at this point, we are time and a little bit of diesel fuel into it, and that's it. So I cut the first 10 acres. I cut the next probably 3 acres and kind of in series, and didn't end up getting that baled before it rained, and we got torrential rain. And so that hay is actually still on the field a couple weeks later. I turned it the other day, was going to bale it. It's moldy. It's not usable for animals, but it's definitely usable for baling, bringing back to the garden area, and the places that I want to tarp over winter, spreading that out. That mold's not going to hurt anything. It's just the hay breaking down. So we're going to use that as a layer, and then re-wet it again underneath our silage tarps, and then put our silage tarps down through the fall, through the winter, into spring, and we're going to get use out of that hay. Now, are we going to get the couple $100 a ton out of it that we could have by selling it as feed? No, but that's farming. So I then cut, after everything started drying out, I cut another probably 8 or 9 acres and got that down, got that laying good. Right about the time it was ready to go, we got torrential rain for days, like not days and days and days straight, but it was definitely a lot of rain every single day, and it just wasn't drying out. So now it's cow hay, and it should be still usable. I did go ahead and rake it a couple days ago, and then it's rained a couple times on it. But as long as there's no mold in it, if the color's out of it, it's still got nutrient. It's just not pretty. And we're working on trying to buy some cows that are just ours and ours alone right now. And so we'll probably have more on that as soon as we can close a deal. But we'll probably use that for our cows. We can still sell it for about $100 a ton as long as it dries out and there's no mold. So I got that raked, and then it wasn't supposed to rain. So I already had the mower on the tractor that we mow and bale with. So I went ahead and just started mowing again, because that hay being raked in a windrow was perfectly fine in that situation, as long as it didn't get rained on. And I mowed another probably 10 acres, and then it rained torrentially. So much so that I had to hightail it off the field with the tractor so that I didn't get stuck and do a bunch of damage. So I now have probably 5 acres of hay left to cut on the one field. I have probably 20 acres down, and it's a fiasco. And I've been doing this for 20 years, cutting hay, helping a friend of mine, and that I do hay with, and that we kind of co-farm together. And at this point, I'm feeling like it's my rookie year and everything I do is wrong. But I feel a little bit better because he's in the same boat, and he's been doing this for 40 years. It's just we're having a really early wet fall, and it's just not conducive to getting the hay put up. So I'm going to make some changes in my plans for next year. I am going to block off a couple weekends, a couple full weeks to get second cutting just done early so I don't have to fight this. I wanted to do that this year, and that's why I started cutting like on the 15th, but we didn't. The rain came the 19th, and we've had pretty consistent rain every couple days since then. So my best efforts were thwarted because I should have been completely done with haying by Labor Day, which is always a good plan around here. Because if it doesn't rain, we get a lot of relative humidity recovery in the mornings, and so that has to burn off before you can bale, and it's kind of a pain. So that's going on in the background, and that's taking a lot of time and a lot of mental space, just trying to salvage whatever I can. Like I said, we're money even other than my labor right now. Sorry, I got to take a sip of coffee there. Money equal other than my labor, which that's fine. We're still doing good things for the field. We're still preparing for future prosperity. That was definitely intended there. Preparing for the field to be better next year. We're preparing for how we're going to cut and handle things next year, learning more about equipment, tweaking things that are not necessarily wrong with equipment or ways that we do things, but definitely making improvements for the future. So we're going to get that hopefully taken care of this week. Probably going to be selling some cheap cow hay. Probably not going to make much money on it, but I should end up with hay for the cows that we're hopefully acquiring, and putting, I don't know, I might be working for $2.50 or $3 an hour, but that's okay. So that's what's been going on. We were gifted the ability to go pick about 100 pounds of apples from a property that is right next to our hayfield. That the owner that lives there is she's in her 90s and she has no use for the apples. The trees were planted in the 70s, I believe. They're magnificent old school apple trees. And her children, which are grandparents in themselves, have no use for them. And so we were able to go in there and we picked about 100 pounds. We made 42 quarts of applesauce. That was fun. That was a lot of time and energy. And Sarah was able to learn a little bit about canning, and I did a good chunk of the after processing from, Sarah went through and washed them and cut them. And then I, par cooked them to soften them up and then ran them through the Ninja blender and then jarred them and ran them through the canning cycle. So great team effort. And then we were given about 30 pounds of pears that are have been run through the process. I just need to can them, and I will do that either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow before the wedding that we have. We've got a late wedding tomorrow for the catering company. And so I don't actually even need to leave until about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. Typically, I'm leaving between 10 and 11 to go cater events, but we're only doing the dinner. And they're doing dinner at 7 o'clock at night, which is really late for a wedding. But that's all right, because we'll still get home probably about 10 o'clock, which is when we normally do. And it'll be easy peasy. So I'll probably go ahead and finish the preparing and preserving on that. And then the big focus this last week has just been really tidying, organizing, cleaning our garage, which is our main storage area. And that's actually the main topic for this podcast that I'm doing today, is organization and storage of your food storage and your large pantry. So if you've been listening for a while, you know that we actually took our garage door out. And where the garage door was, I put in a man door, a 3-foot wide exterior door, like on the front of a house. And then I finished walling it off and insulated and sheathed the rest of the opening. And then we have a bunch of storage shelves in the garage. And I did that because our house is 1,150 square feet. and we have 6 people living in it, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, and it's tight. It's comfortable on a little bit of a space constraint, but this size of a house does not bode well for living a preparedness homesteading style life as far as the storage required, because people that start getting into the homesteading, start getting into the preparedness, think, oh yeah, it's going to be great. I'm going to have, 3 or 6 months or a year worth of food storage on the shelf. And we're going to have the toilet paper and the dish soap and all of the stuff that goes with it. And that's fantastic. But you don't think about how much space that actually takes. And it's significant. If you're doing your own canning and preserving, the figure for a family our size is somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 quart jars. Now, that's 100 cases of quart jars. And that's kind of an average for larger families going to use larger containers. But that's about a little over 2 square feet of space per dozen. And so you're talking about like 200 to 250 square feet of storage space. And I'm thinking that might actually be 2.5 square feet. Now that I'm thinking about it and kind of looking at a box here. But you're talking about several hundred square feet of shelf space that's required to store just your canning jars. And the thing about it is, it's not like when you buy stuff at the store and, you go buy a case of jars, or you go buy, you've got 12 things of pasta sauce on your shelf. Well, when you use those jars and containers go away through the trash, through recycling, whatever. When you do home canning and home preserving, you're reusing those jars over and over and over again. So when that's empty, it's still got to go on a spot on your shelf. So full or empty, you're storing the same amount of space. You just have either more or less food. And then you have to think about, when you're doing that, you have your replacement lids for the jars when you use them the next time that you have to store, as well as all your rings. And most people that do canning, you've got wide mouth and you've got narrow mouth rings. And most people will keep, 100 or 120 of each, and then they get rid of the rest because you store your canned goods without the ring on there. So you're getting rid of a bunch of that type of stuff, but you still have several hundred rings that you're holding on to. For when you do your canning exercises, because when we do a canning day, and when most people do a big canning day, you're not canning a dozen jars, you're canning 2 or 3 or 4 dozen at a time. So you need, anywhere for, like if we did all that applesauce in one day, you're talking about basically 50 of those wide mouth rings just to do that, let alone what else you might want to do at the same time. And how we do our canning is we have a Camp Chef 3-burner stove outside, and that's what we do all our water bath canning with. We've got 2 water bath canners that are on there, and then there's enough room for a pot for when we were doing the apples, you're putting the apples in boiling water for a couple minutes to soften them up so you can turn them into applesauce. That's on there as well. So it kind of makes everything simple. And that's another thing you have to store is that Camp Chef stove. Now, one of my things is not having single use items, have multitaskers, not single taskers or unitaskers. And so we can use that stove for canning. We can use it for camping. We can put a griddle on it and use it for impromptu Blackstone at the house as well. Plus, if the power goes out, we can still boil water and do all those things. So it's got multiple uses. But this thing is over a foot wide, 4 feet long, and about 9 inches deep. And this thing takes, storage space. So a great way to start off is if you have a Costco or Sam's Club membership. There's a Trinity brand is the name, and they sell them at Home Depot and Lowe's as well, some of the other big box stores. But Sam's and Costco typically have the best deal on them. And they're about a 4 foot wide by 18 inch deep shelf that has 6 shelves on it, and they're adjustable with these little plastic clips. And we have like 37 of these shelves between the catering business, between the storage shed, and between the garage and a bunch of other stuff. We've got a lot of these things. They used to go on sale for somewhere in the neighborhood of $80, $89. Now they're about $120 a set, but it's still a pretty darn good deal. And they are way cheaper on there than they are in like an Amazon situation. So we just kind of set them for, where the quart jars are going to go. We set them for about an inch taller than the quart jars. And then they fit, I believe they fit 4 quart jars deep. And then you can tentatively fit like 36 quarts per shelf. And then what I like to do is your pasta sauce all goes together when you make your pasta sauce. And then your jars, as you use them, if you've got a jar of pickles, a jar of pasta sauce, and a jar of applesauce, that the jars all got washed at the same time. It doesn't matter where the jar goes, but you put that empty jar back with the pasta sauce so that you retain your pasta sauce jar count, so that next time you go to make pasta sauce, you don't have to figure out where the jars were. It's always good to keep notes on when you canned, what you canned, how you canned it, the recipe, and then kind of keep track year after year of, well, we made 50 quarts of pasta sauce last year, and it wasn't enough. We want to have 72 quarts next year, so you make an extra. And then the next year you go, well, we didn't use 72. I still got 6 left, so maybe we'll do 65. And kind of have that be the number. But then you don't have to worry about acquiring the jars or figuring out where the jars come from. And it takes up the open spaces on the shelves as you're getting rid of stuff. So you don't have to have twice the storage. One storage for empty jars, and then the other storage for your canned goods. And then as you use your canned goods, that shelf is getting empty, and then you're filling up a different shelf. And it just it makes everything a lot easier to store your empty jars with your full jars. And then always, you want to wash your jars when you finish using the product and whatever, but we're always running the jars through the dishwasher right before we can with them, so that we know that they're freshly cleaned and sanitized. And half the time the jars are kind of pre-warmed, so that when they go into the warming situation, they're getting warmed as well, and they're, you're making some progress. So, storage is a huge thing. Now, ultimately, my goal is to build custom shelves for our canning jars that are a little bit heavier, a little bit deeper, and just kind of an easier setup. Because what I don't like about these shelves is they're only 4 feet wide, but they're not 4 feet wide on the inside. They're 4 feet wide on the outside. So you lose about 2.5 to 3 inches on the inside. And that's not horrible, but the way things tend to flow, there's wasted space. And so they're great to start off with, but eventually what I would like to do is build like 6 or 8 foot long shelves out of wood, and then have them be on flat, on smooth wood, so they're not on the little ridges like the Trinity shelves are. And then everything can be organized a little bit better and fit a lot better. And then those shelves are just kind of permanently mounted there like that. We didn't do that because, one, when we started this whole moving around and everything project, OSB was like, it was in the 40s during COVID. And so we had a bunch of these racks already from when we had the bakery building, so we didn't have to buy a whole lot more. I think since we've sold our bakery building that the catering business was out of, and we've moved everything to our house, I think we've bought in a total of only 4 of those racks. So we already had a bunch of them, which is the best thing to use when you're first getting going, is what you have or what is easily and cheaply available to you. So, and then the other thing to kind of keep in mind is when you have the rings, the new lids, they come in a cardboard box. And while if a perfect world, the temperature would be steady in your storage room and the humidity would be well controlled, But what I like to do is I like to take those rings and I leave them in the box, the ball box, because it's got the serial number and all that kind of stuff. And you can tell if there's ever been a recall and blah, blah, blah. But I like to put them in in a, a plastic tub, and Walmart, Target, a bunch of places sell these tubs that have a gasket on them. And so when you seal that, you're kind of locking the humidity that's in there, and everything just kind of seems to hold better. The cardboard holds up better over time. And we shouldn't be keeping jar lids for years and years and years that are needing done. Now with COVID and everything that all the hard times finding lids, we were on a track where we bought, if we got an okay price, sub 350 a thing, we were buying every wide mouth lid that we could get, because if we didn't need it, I knew a bunch of people that did. And so we were buying them by the case. We were buying, just clearing shelves, not just to hoard them, but just because we've got some friends that can, long-term storage type stuff. And so we only kept probably a third or a quarter of what we kind of bulked up on during that time, but we made sure that we had enough to can for what we had jars for the next year, so that when we did the canning the next year, we would be able to take a year basically to find the lids. And it's never been like that. And right now, I was at Walmart yesterday, and they have something like 50 cases of wide mouth lids as you first walk in the door for $3.50 a piece. And every part of me wanted to buy a couple cases of them, but we're pretty well set on lids, at least for this year. And I don't want to, I don't want to have a bunch of lids that get to be the point of too old before they're canned with. And then, you kind of get a little bit leery of them, trustworthy wise and stuff like that. Now, if you're a rebel canner, you can save lids, and depending on what you're doing with it, your pasta sauces, your jams and jellies and stuff like that, you can reuse lids. The FDA and Ball will tell you no, but there are a lot of people that have been doing it for a lot of years. And it's just kind of common sense. If you're going to pressure can meat and stuff like that, you want to use a brand new lid. I haven't seen anybody that recommends reusing lids for that. But jams and jellies and high acid stuff like that, that's just going to water bath. If you're not denting and destroying those lids when they come off, there are some people that do reuse lids. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. So we've got our lids, we've got our jars, we've got our rings. A lot of people will take a clothes hanger and they'll unfold it and they'll put their rings on it. There's lots of really cool ways to store those rings and keep them kind of hung in their own kind of place. So that's the canning aspect of it. Now, that's some prepared foods, that's some condiments, stuff like that. Now your dry goods. We are a fairly heavy rice family. We eat a lot of rice. And we eat jasmine rice, and I like the flavor of it, and it's good stuff. But we keep, a reasonable quantity on hand at any given time. And how we store that is in gallon buckets with Gamma Seal lids. And what those are is they're kind of a bugger to pop on. The lids are kind of a bugger to pop on just a food grade random 5-gallon bucket. I've been buying a lot of them at Tractor Supply lately because Tractor Supply is 10 miles away and convenient. And they seem to have a pretty good supply of them, and they're reasonable. I was buying them at Winco for a while, but the price is like $7 or $8 a thing, and then they barely have them anymore. And your Home Depot, your Lowe's, your standard buckets like that from the hardware stores, they're not food safe. And it only costs $1 or $2 more to buy a food safe one. And you should really do that. If you're going to store food in, especially not in a bag or something like that, you should really be using food safe buckets. There's a reason they're food safe. The plastic is of a higher quality. The plastic is of a food grade quality, where a Home Depot bucket is just some nasty plastic that's going to leach. It's still kind of porous. Even though it holds water, it's still kind of porous. and it's just not great. So Tractor Supply buckets with a Gamma Seal lid. And those lids are fantastic because while they're a bugger to get on there initially with the clamp ring, they're just like a half a turn twist and the whole top comes off basically. And there's a seal in there and it's all sealed up and it's great. And so we have 5-gallon buckets that have rice. We have all-purpose flour. We have flour for making sourdough. We have our rice flour in a smaller container, but kind of the same thing. And then we have sugar. And we have our beans, our dried beans in them as well. And so you start getting any sort of supply and stock, and you start realizing that a 50-pound bag of sugar, which is the most economical way to buy pretty much all these things, is in a 50-pound. That takes 2 5-gallon buckets. So if you do 50 pounds of all-purpose flour, of rice, of sugar, and of one kind of bean, that's 4 different types. That's 8 5-gallon buckets. That's going to take a vertical space, 2 buckets wide, almost all the way to the ceiling, and actually kind of higher than most people are going to want to go. And then if you get into grinding your own wheat berries into flour, which is where we're headed as soon as I can pinch the pennies correctly and justify spending $600 on a wheat grinder. There's a fantastic wheat grinder that's made in Stevensville, Montana, not very far from us. And I actually know the owner of the company, and his daughter is actually the one that we get our raw milk from. And they're fantastic units, fantastic. Their main one is, I believe it's called the number 99. And the name of the brand escapes me right now. But they're several $100s, but they are by far the best grain mill on the market for home use. So if you're going to do that, now you're storing wheat berries. And when you buy wheat berries, typically you're buying several 100 pounds at a time. So then you're getting into that much more space it's going to take to store. So it quite frankly builds up a lot. And now, so you've got your canned goods, your sauces and stuff like that. You've got your flours and your sugars and your rice. Then you kind of just roll into your other stuff that you want to store. Now, being preparedness minded, being homestead minded, living away and out in the country, you don't ever want to run out of toilet paper no matter where you are, but you definitely don't want to run out of toilet paper or start running super low and then have to go to the store and pay double for the nasty stuff at the rinky-dink grocery store next door or down the street. And you really don't want to drive 50 miles to Costco to buy the big package. So we typically have between 3 and 4 of the big Costco size things of toilet paper on the shelf all the time. Now you think, wow, that's a lot of toilet paper. How much can you use? We really don't use that much. And it's, typically there a couple sales pass before we buy another 2 more. And so what we do is, we get to 4 and then we'll use one of them and then we'll use the second one. And about the time we're running through the second one, getting towards the end, it typically goes on sale at Costco again. So we buy a couple more. And then we use Bounty paper towels as well. And we typically stock more of those, but that's because we have the catering company as well. So we have 6 to 8 cases of those on hand at any given time. But the vast majority of that is because it's the catering company. And we use a lot of paper towels for that. And yes, you could make your own paper towel, your own cloth towels to reuse and all that kind of stuff. And that's all well and good. I'm not doing that for my catering company. It's too much of a pain in the butt. And we just kind of pick our battles, and it's there again, living with that. Don't let the good be the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just do what you can and get better at what you can. We still have pasta sauce that's store-bought on the shelf that we're using up as we're getting ready to make this year's batch of pasta sauce, because last year we didn't get to it. We had the jars, we had every intention of it, we had the tomatoes, and it just didn't happen because life happens. And so what did we do? We bulked up and we bought like 72, I think we bought 6 cases of pasta sauce last year. And so it's still on the shelf. We also have some Alfredo sauce on the shelf that's still store bought. I mean, there's a good chunk. The vast majority of what we have on the shelf is still kind of around that, store bought aspect, because it is what it is. Now we don't buy canned beans anymore, black beans, red beans, anything like that. We just soak them overnight. They're so much cheaper. They're so much better, so much easier. So we don't do any of that. And then we still purchase canned corn because corn is one of those nightmare things that it's not really profitable or even worth doing at this point. We have way more pertinent things to do. So we've got our canned goods, we've got our dried goods. We keep some pasta on the shelf, but we're also moving into making more of our own pastas. And then we've got our toilet paper and the paper towels. Now we also keep, because we're living pretty frugally and we're trying to keep everything as economical as possible. When toothbrushes go on sale at Costco, like they are right now, we buy both of the packs of 10 that you can buy on the sale. And then when we go back here in a couple of days, we'll do it again. And then we have these little shoe bin organizer totes that are 6 inches wide by about 4 inches deep and 12 inches long. And they come in a pack of 10 at Walmart. And we use that for organizing all of our small things. And then on those shelves towards the top, we've got food towards the bottom. And then as you get closer to the top, we go to narrower shelves. And then we have boxes of matches in one. We have inner tubes for the kids' bicycle tires and patch kits in another one. We've got I call them a clicker dicker lighter, but they're the like the red or blue stereotypical lighter that has the handle with the finger guard, and you click it and it's got about a 6-inch throat on it there. And then we've got like Bic lighters, and then we've got batteries in some of them, and we've got toothbrushes, and we've got toothpaste, and I've been using Dr. Squatch soap, so we've got a whole thing of Dr. Squatch soap is the whole is what that bin is. And the nice thing about that is it keeps that smell really contained, and so that smell's not permeating in everything. And so that's what we use for those smaller things. And then we've got a tote that has a clear tote. It's probably a 10-gallon tote, and it's got some bandages in it. It's got horse wrap, ace wrap, all of those things, just in case there was some sort of catastrophe and the power was down or whatever, or AJ is just being AJ and I screw something up. I don't like to go to the doctor or to the hospital, and I do a lot of my own doctoring and stuff. So having gauze and that type of stuff is good. But then we also have like your Q-tips and your cotton balls and that type of stuff is in one tote as well. And those are on the top because we can fit 3 totes to the ceiling. Those totes are just on top because we're not in them very often. So when we need something, I just go out to the garage, pull the totes down, grab out what we need to kind of restock inside, and then put them back up. And then we've got a tote that has a couple things of isopropyl alcohol. It's got a couple things of peroxide. It's got Tylenol and ibuprofen and cold and sinus medicine and probiotics and all of the things that we just kind of use in regular life. And we don't use a lot of Tylenol and stuff like that. But especially when you've got a little one, and Alexander, when he gets sick, he throws right into a massive fever. And so we start fairly quickly with giving him some Tylenol and Motrin on the offset, and try to space it out as much as we can just to help keep that fever down, because he goes right above 102 like yesterday. So we've got that, and that's all on shelves in there. And then any other things that we like to have, like we're not a big juice family, but we've got several jugs of juice that are, we've got several things of apple juice, and we've got a few things of grape juice, and we've got lots and lots of the large size jugs of lemon juice for canning. And that's all kind of in there and mixed everything as organized as possible. But it takes a lot of space. And so I'm not trying to convince anybody that you shouldn't do this, because everybody absolutely should do this. Everybody should have a storehouse pantry in their house. The power can go out. You can lose a job. Any number of things can happen other than like the SHTF and Civil War and all these, the zombie apocalypse and all these prepper fantasy things. Everybody should do this, and everybody can find a place to do this. And if you don't have the storage space to be able to have a year worth of food on hand, what do you have the storage space for to do that? And how can you make the storage space for that? We've got a 4-foot crawl space. We could have, I could have done some work down there, made it a lot nicer, and used that as a root cellar, and we still can, but I want it convenient. I want Sarah and the boys to be able to go out and just grab stuff if they need it. And so we didn't go that route. Plus our house was built in the 90s, and none of our vehicles actually fit in the garage because it's so small. It's 19 by 19, and how they ever thought anything was going to fit in there is beyond me. I've had 2 vehicles I've ever been able to park in there consistently. So it's just big storage. So why have a garage door and tracks in the way? But don't get so focused on where everything's going to take, this amount of space everything's going to take, that you don't do it. But really just kind of think when you're getting going on this, where am I going to put this stuff? Because you can spend a lot of time, and trust me, we have spent a lot of time moving the stuff around, and it's heavy and it's bulky, and if it's in jars, it's a chance of ruining it, stuff like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. And where we started was we had a 3-foot by 3-foot linen closet at the end of the hallway next to the bedrooms. And Sarah, when she moved in, that was one of our biggest battles, was she wanted the linen closet back. And I said, no, this is the pantry. And so that's where it was for the first few years we were married. And it worked all right. It wasn't ideal. But it did work. And then it was in 2020 during the shutdowns, when, it was a few months in, and it was realized that we hadn't really gone to the grocery store for much other than perishables for a couple months, and there was still food in there. And then Sarah was on board, and we started kind of growing how much storage we had. And, if you're the one that's leading the charge, just be patient. Nothing good comes from forcing a topic. It's all, people have to come to when they're ready to. And so, if your partner is not so much on board, but they're not drastically against it, just do your thing. Keep your head down. When they ask questions, because they will, answer them. Don't be sarcastic. Don't be rude. Don't be mean. Don't be harsh. I have to tell myself that all the time, because that's the way I get, because this is just the way I've lived for so long. But you really just need to do everything you can to get your partner on board, but also don't let their negativity stop you from doing a little bit. Because I tell you what, knowing that you have that sitting on your shelf, knowing that you have preparedness and preps sitting on your shelf is so comforting, and so it puts you in a better place, mentally and emotionally as well. Especially knowing that, if you lose a job, or like in our case, if we just don't get a bunch of bookings for next year, people don't book a wedding 2 weeks out unless there's a catastrophe. People are booking a long ways out, and with the economy doing the things that it's doing, I'm not altogether too certain that we are going to get a lot of high dollar bookings for next year. But I know that we have a lot of food on the shelf that we use. There again, don't buy food that you're not going to eat and that your kids aren't going to eat. And we'll get into another copy canning episode probably next week. I'm not running the freeze dryer at the moment, so we might do that on Wednesday instead. But don't go out and buy a bunch of food that you're not going to eat, because you're not going to eat it, and then it is going to go to waste. The biggest thing to keep in mind with this when you're getting into it is you're investing in your future. Food always goes up in price, and so it's not like you're not going to eat the food. So it's not like you're wasting the money. You're just spending the money now instead of spending the money later. And then as you shop, it doesn't cost any more once you get your basic setup that you're going to stick with taken care of. Once that's taken care of, yeah, that costs a little bit of money right now, but as you just go on your week to week and you just do your shopping and replacing the food that you've used out of your pantry and rotating the stock so that it's not going to over age and not going bad that way, it really doesn't cost any more to live. But if you lose a job, if you don't get a booking, if something financially happens, if one of your family members has a major catastrophe, and you want to be able to help them, but you don't have a lot, you could theoretically give them your grocery money for the week, because you could just live off of your pantry if that's all you had to do and you felt so compelled or whatever. It gives optionality in life. And keep in mind, for a family of 5-6 folks, especially when you get into teenage years, 900 to 1,200 jars of food plus all the other storage. I mean, you're looking at probably a dedicated area of 6 or 7 feet wide and 10 feet long of shelves. And I tell you what, though, it's great. It's great when you get it. So definitely do that. In the show notes for this, I'm going to do some Amazon links for different things that we use, different things that we like, different totes and stuff like that. By all means, if you want to buy them on Amazon, that's cool. You could probably get a better deal on a lot of it, including the shelving, direct from one of your local purveyors, like I said. So with that, this has been AJ Harrison with Preparing for Prosperity. Go out, have a great weekend, and don't forget, beg, borrow, or barter. Just do what you can and do what you got to do to get the things done. All right, guys, have a great weekend.